Welcome back, welcome back. Much of the talk these days in the US, when it isn't about the elections, is about the movie industry. Last week's Golden Globe Awards were disrupted by the screenwriters' strike, which is threatening next month's Oscars too. Lèse-majesté. I caught up with Hollywood's most glittering star of the moment, George Clooney, and, well, in fact, the strike was just one of many subjects we talked about. George, we have a great deal in common. We both nearly ended up as professional sportsmen. You at the age of, 16 with baseball, and me at the age of 18 with soccer in England. I think we've had a longer career by doing what we did, don't you think?
I don't think I would have had a very long career in baseball. I only lacked talent.
Oh, that's all.
For the skill. I had everything else. I could wear the proper clothes. I could chew the tobacco and do all the things that were important. I just lacked skill.
And eventually I worked that out.
I decided to find something that required no skill, and I thought, why not acting?
And did you actually think of acting very early on, or did you?
You know, my father started out in the news, and then in Cincinnati, Ohio. He ended up hosting the Nick Clooney show, which was a variety show. And there were no, my mom worked on the show she did commercials on the show and did cue cards and worked the audience, did the warm-ups for the audience. And since there were no babysitters, we had no babysitters. We lived about 40 miles from WKRC, the TV station. In the summers, my sister and I just went there from 7 in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. We just stayed at the TV station. So I did all of these shows from the time I was a young kid. I did variety shows. I would do commercials and I would do routines. If it was Easter, I'd have an Easter bunny outfit on and with a cigar. I was like 10 years old and my dad would interview me. So, Easter bunny, how's it going? I go, well, it's a very busy season, obviously, for me, So it was sort of vaudeville. And then, but never any idea, you could never think of that as translating into acting or Hollywood. I always thought of it as broadcasting, and there seemed to be a chasm between those.
And so when did it move from vaudeville and the family tradition of vaudeville into being a real actor?
Well, I'll tell you, it was a funny thing. I was cutting tobacco one summer, which is not a fun job. But that was one of our family trade in Kentucky, and a lot of my family. And it's a good way to make money when you're a kid, I was 20 years old. And my cousins, who I knew only a little bit because they lived in Hollywood, Rosemary Clooney was my aunt, and she had been married to Jose Ferrer. And Jose and his two sons, who were my cousins, Miguel and Rafi, came to Kentucky to do a movie when I was 20 years old. And I went down because I was really sort of wanted to spend time with them and was fascinated by their lives. It always seemed like such a glamorous thing. And I spent about 3 months just spending time with my cousin Miguel mostly. And then Jose said, well, you ought to go to Hollywood and be an actor. And I said, okay. And so I got in my car a couple months later and just drove into Los Angeles and said, all right, I'm an actor.
Oh, fantastic. And the rest is history.
And then it was very easy after that.
Yeah.
It all just, you show up and you say, I'm Rosemary Clooney's nephew.
You really became a mega hit at the age of 33, didn't you? Really?
Yeah.
With the ER and so on. During the period before that, did you have a complete faith that you were going to make it, or did you sometimes think maybe I should
quit?
Go back to baseball?
Baseball had long passed. Yeah. The truth is, sometimes you get too much credit as an actor when people look back and they say, well, you were struggling for quite a period of time. I had 2 or 3 years that I didn't make any money and was really, was doing construction work and living in a closet in my buddy's house, apartment building, for about 2 years, 2.5 years. Then I started getting jobs, television series. Now, they weren't always great jobs. A lot of them were sort of terrible TV shows. But most people in the acting profession don't make any money at all. About 95% of the people in the Screen Actors Guild make less than $10,000 a year. So I was making a good living. I was making $100,000 a year, suddenly. and that's succeeding in a big way, even if it's not, even if it's not shows you're proud of necessarily.
Yeah, yeah.
You still feel like you're succeeding. So I never really had that feeling that I was failing. I just wasn't doing what I wanted to do.
And it was the right thing came along.
Yeah,
but it wasn't awkward doing it because Los Angeles can be awful lonely for people, can't it?
It can be. I had a great group of friends who I met the first year I got there, and we sort of became this close group of guys that I still see, every Sunday, and their kids come by and their wives come by, and we grill out and watch movies, and we're really close still.
Do you think, because you read tragic stories about young people who become famous young and so on and so forth, and this week the headlines of Britney Spears, but not particularly just Britney Spears. No. Do you think the combination of your as it were show business background and the fact that you hit it big at 33 made fame easier to cope with?
I was better prepared to handle it. I think though, nowadays, I think much more so than it was before, and I know everybody sort of likes to reminisce and say the good old days. That's not what I'm saying. But the only way you could really achieve fame, for the most part, there was a sort of a process. You probably did some theater that you got an agent from, and from that agent you got some TV, and from the TV you got, there was a sort of a stair step, and now there's sort of an instantaneous way of getting famous. And it seems to me that you're not allowed then to build up this fortress around you of understanding. Like Rosemary got very famous in 1952, very famous, and everybody told her she was my aunt, and everybody told her she was brilliant and she was great. And then within 5 years, pop music was gone and rock and roll was in, and she was done. And she suddenly, everyone around her that was supposed to be great, you're a genius, Rosemary, you're a god. They're all gone. And so somehow she thought that was her, well then I must not be a genius because before I believed it, so I have to believe this. I was very lucky in the fact that I got all of that stuff, I didn't get famous for about 13 years of doing it, which is a great lesson in how little it has to do with you.
I once asked Noel Coward this question, which is, what is star quality? And he said, the stars have it and the non-stars don't. that was his definition and so on. But what is star quality, do you think?
The ability to say you once asked Noel Coward a question makes you a star. That's a pretty great one. I'm impressed by that. Absolutely impossible to identify, because you can have people be great actors, and for one reason or another, it just doesn't happen for them. Even great in movies that are successful, and it still somehow doesn't click for them. And you can have other actors sort of not be great in a film that's somewhat successful, but there's something that people identify with. And I don't know what it is. All I know is you know it when you see it. I see it every once in a while, and I go, there it is, that kid's a star. Yeah. I've seen that in television lately. You'll see a couple of young actors, because we're lacking sort of young leading men right now. And you look around, you go, who's a good, solid young leading man? You go, that kid's a star.
Are you going to be able to do anything to help, as the headlines say, end the writers' strike?
Well, look, I got up at the Broadcast Film Critics, and I just said what we all believe, which is we should do this like choosing a pope. We should put everybody in a room, you leave them in a room until we see the smoke come out of the chimney and everything's okay. I have every sympathy for the writers, because I believe that they have been treated unfairly. I understand when the studios say, hey, we're being taken advantage of. If that's the fight, it will end up landing somewhere in the middle.
Yes.
And the question is when. And my issue is not about actors or writers or directors. My issue is about all these other people who make a living on this at this every day in my town, in Los Angeles in particular. The construction workers and the restaurants and all of those places. I'm not as concerned with what they're going to end up with, because it's going to be somewhere in the middle. I am very concerned when they don't go into a room and talk, and that makes me crazy. get in the room, and that's the CEOs as well as the the heads of the writers. So hopefully that's happening. I'm only involved in trying to volunteer to try to get people in a room that know one another.
Your family were very Catholic, you've said.
Oh
and so
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Has that had an influence on your life?
Guilt. Mm-hmm. You bet. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Guilt. When I was, I don't know. Were you raised a religion at all, or?
Yeah, Methodist.
Methodist. Well, that's a little easier.
Yeah.
You don't have to do all the stuff. Second grade, we got to go. You have to go to confession once a week. In second grade. I remember once a week. What are you doing in second grade that you got to confess once a week? I would make up sins. I remember.
You have to. You need some material.
You need some material always.
Yeah,
I remember I'd go down that list of the 10 Commandments, and I remember telling a priest that I'd committed adultery because I thought that meant just acting like an adult, which I'm now fairly sure that's probably right. And then I remember eventually, because it was a very small town, that you realize that the priest knows your voice. You got this screen you confess through, but it's there's 14 kids in the school, so he knows he knows who it is. So when you finally have some stuff you really do want to confess, like by 5th or 6th grade, I read in the Bible where the saint would put a pebble in her shoe and walk around for penance. So I would go into the confessional, and I would only confess what I thought was important for the priest to really know. And then the other big secrets that I had, I would fill my shoes with gravel, and I would jump off the top of my bunk beds. then I would be cleansed, and I would have been healed from that. And in some ways, I still have that mentality. You still have that thing of things are going well, then maybe I should purge somehow.
The dashing figure of George Clooney. Next week, there's more from George on politics, marriage, and other topics. Now, with only a year left of his presidency, can the lame duck George Bush make a difference to the world and a difference to his legacy? I'll be discussing US foreign policy after this incredibly short break.